It is fierce, it's abrasive, and burning with fury. But you wouldn't have guessed it by looking at today's featured songwriter, who's something of a sonic angel. In fact, her distinctive voice has even been called saint-like. Yet when you piss off one of the strongest female voices in rock history, this is what you get. Responding to a tragic and violent bombing that took the lives of 2 innocent children, this ethereal frontwoman powered up her dreamy folk sound and unleashed a series of siren screams that no one knew that she had in her, effectively putting the world on notice. The violence had to stop, so get ready. It's the story of an unexpected raging rocker that left us completely stunned. Coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember counting down the top 40 hits with Casey Kasem on a weekly basis, you're going to dig this channel. Make sure that you subscribe, hit the red button, click the bell. That way you know when our latest and greatest interviews and our videos drop. So it's time for another edition of Number One in Our Hearts. This show honors songs that were so unbelievably great, they absolutely should have been number one on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. But for whatever reason, be it lack of marketing, radio play, label support, or just sheer stupidity, the song came up short. On previous episodes, we have covered Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers, Buddy Holly by Weezer, and Sowing the Seeds of Love by Tears for Fears.
Take me all away. I know just like Buddy Holly.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into one of the biggest songs to ever come out of Ireland, from a fearless sonic angel, Zombie by the Cranberries. Before we get into the song, I need to take a moment to talk about the disastrous event that triggered this song. Throughout much of the 20th century, Northern Ireland was a battleground where violent clashes raged between Catholics and Protestants, kept many civilians in a state of perpetual fear. Those clashes and that hatred would also spill over to British soil. Tragically, on March 20th, 1993, 3-year-old Tim Perry and 12-year-old Jonathan Ball became the victims of a senseless act of violence instigated by the IRA. Otherwise known as the Irish Republican Army, the IRA was a militant group determined to remove British troops from Northern Ireland. For that day in Warrington, Northern England, 2 bombs exploded within a minute of each other in rubbish bins outside on Bridge Street. Not only were 56 people injured from the explosions, but these 2 young boys lost their lives. The attack shocked and appalled the public in the UK and Ireland alike. Many could only look on in horror and mourn. The Cranberries frontwoman Dolores O'Riordan, she was one of them. When the news of the attack broke, the Cranberries were touring in England. Said Dolores, "I remember at the time there were a lot of bombs going off in London and the troubles were pretty bad. I remember being on tour and being in the UK at the time when the children died and just being really sad about it all. These bombs were going off in random places. It could have been anyone, you know." For years, Dolores would vividly remember seeing one of the boys' mothers on television. She was completely devastated, as was Dolores. Soon after that, the anger and the sadness that she felt over the tragedy began to burn within her. She picked up her guitar in search of catharsis. The result would be a song that would become an icon of a generation and live on as an anthem calling out for peace in the decades that followed. Hailing from Limerick, Ireland, the Cranberries were one of the most unique alternative acts to hit the US mainstream in the 90s. Their sound was fueled by the unmistakable siren call of Dolores O'Riordan's voice. Although the band itself actually predated her, the Cranberries originally launched in the late 80s with Noel Hogan on guitar, his brother Mike Hogan on bass, Feargal Lawler on drums, and Neil Quinn was on vocals. Back then, they went by the puntastic moniker The Cranberry Sauce, as in the cranberry sauce. But after Quinn left the band, the remaining trio auditioned O'Riordan, and like the rest of us, they were completely blown away by this incredible voice. It was a no-brainer to bring her in as their lead singer. So fast forward to March 1st, 1993, the Cranberries, as they were now known, they released their debut album, Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We? It was, of course, a bona fide hit, selling 1 million US copies by the end of the year and going platinum ×5 by the end of the decade. Powered by 2 timeless singles, Dreams went to number 15 on the US Alternative Chart, and Linger reached number 4. Great songs. Now, to support the album, the Cranberries embarked on a lengthy tour across the US and Europe. Along the way, the foursome began writing songs for the next album. No need to argue. Now, a more experienced songwriter, Dolores O'Riordan started to create tracks with more layers than the acoustic-based songs that she'd written for their debut. The lush beauty of Everybody Else Is Doing It, it was about to give way to a more refined sound that would at times incorporate a much harder edge. Recorded in the US and UK. No need to argue, have the Irish quartet teaming up for a second time with former Smiths and Blur producer Stephen Street. Released on October 3rd of 1994, the album was a smash success, peaking at number 6 on the Billboard 200 album chart and selling 1 million copies within the first 3 weeks of its release. Would later actually sell 7 million copies in the US alone, and it sold 17 million worldwide. No Need to Argue produced 4 singles: Ode to My Family, I Can't Be With You, Ridiculous Thoughts, and of course, Zombie. The eruption of trouble between Northern Ireland and London had really been gnawing away at Dolores. Tensions between the two sides were running very high at that time, and it was almost more than she could bear. Then while the band was touring through England, their tour bus passed by the location where the bombs had killed these 2 little boys. Being there in person, it devastated Dolores. It broke her heart all over again, knowing these innocent children had become the victims of this senseless conflict. Said O'Riordan, I draw from a lot of different life experiences. Births, deaths, war, pain, depression, anger, sadness. I'm also obsessed with mortality. I have bipolar disorder, so I struggle with mood swings. I go from one extreme to the next. But I think that was irrelevant when writing Zombie because the event was so massive at the time, it was all over the papers. I just remember being young and spirited without any hangups. I would just write what I thought, end of quote. And after returning home to Ireland, this is exactly what she did. Coming back home to her flat in Limerick after a night out, Dolores' thoughts and emotions started to converge. So she sat down with her acoustic guitar and she started strumming the chords to Zombie. Channeling her grief into the music, the chorus came out really fast and sounded completely anthemic from the beginning. As soon as she nailed the hook in the chorus, O'Riordan started thinking about the verses. And then they just came pouring out. No inhibitions, just pure emotion. It may be surprising that Zombie, blazing with distortion and fury, started out as a soft acoustic number, but honestly, that wouldn't last long. By the time she took the song into rehearsals, Dolores was ready to make it rock. She was adamant that Zombie had to be heavier than anything that they had ever done. The music had to be angrier, denser, and electric. So she traded in her acoustic guitar for an electric guitar. Then she kicked on some distortion and she told Ferg, you gotta beat those drums pretty hard. The rest of the band members still remember that exact moment. They were all packed inside a tiny damp rehearsal shed in Limerick. There was no heating, and it was just the four of them, playing for the first time what would become the biggest song of their career. Now, some would later say that the Cranberries were just jumping on the grunge bandwagon with this heavy, distorted track. But you know what? First of all, Dolores was clear on the matter. Even though a lot of bands at the time were part of the grunge thing, they were never grunge, the Cranberries. Their sound was something completely different. That's what made them so great. They had a different sound. They were just a different type of band. After all, they were Irish, they were from Limerick. They had their own musical vision. Zombie was recorded in Dublin, and producer Stephen Street spent a long time working on getting the guitar settings just right to create the song's expansive sound. When Dolores finally heard the finished product, she thought, wow, that's catchy. But she didn't have any idea at the time that the song would be so ultra successful. In terms of lyrics and meaning, Zombie takes the bulletproof position that killing young children is pure evil. And that should be obvious. But believe it or not, there was actually some controversy surrounding the song, claiming that the Cranberries were trying to push their own political agenda. However, Dolores pushed back, saying, people said that we shouldn't have done Zombie. But excuse me, I'm Irish. I'm a human being. I'm allowed to have feelings about the North. I express those feelings in my songs. It's up to people then to decide whether they want to listen to them or not. I think we can all agree that the death of these two children was a tragedy and should have been remembered, and this song is a perfect way to do it. Elsewhere, O'Riordan stated her purpose of writing the song, to paraphrase, there's no excuse for taking the lives of innocent children and for mothers to have to bear such a terrible loss. It doesn't matter whether you are Protestant or Catholic, English or Irish. At the end of the day, people have to stop hurting each other. And that is all that Dolores cared about. That's what provoked her to write the song in the first place. In a sense, Zombie's lyrics are autobiographical. Not that they describe what actually happened to her, but it's more like she was surrounded by those events. And the song captures her own reactions, her own emotions. For instance, when Zombie opens up, O'Riordan sings the lines, another head hangs lowly, child is slowly taken. That is a direct reference to the bombing, and then reference to the violence causing silence. That, I think, can be interpreted as the shock and mourning that immediately followed this. As Dolores approaches the chorus, she sings, but you see, it's not me, it's not my family.
You see, it's not me, it's not my family.
This is her defending herself and the band. It's a statement saying that she had nothing to do with the IRA. She does not condone their violent methods. When you get to the chorus, man, oh man, the song just skyrockets. I mean, the power, the outrage, and the pleading reach unbelievable heights. This is what the song is all about. It goes beyond the tragedies of losing innocent children and terrorism and war. Zombie is a song about actually feeling something for one another. It's about our humanity. I mean, in the context of the song as Zombie, someone who is completely devoid of compassion and kindness, someone who has become so callous to the suffering of others. Got a lot of those walking around right now. And though the question, what's in your head, may be rhetorical, I'd say a good guess that what's inside looks something like a war zone. Nothing but tanks and bombs and guns occupying that space. Zombie is by far the most aggressive song in the Cranberries' catalog, bar none. And it stands apart from everything else that they've ever written. As good as it is a true masterpiece that will break your heart in two if you let it. As it was with so many other mainstream 90s hits or songs. Much of Zombie's success has to be credited to its amazing music video. If you got your video into heavy rotation on MTV, you knew you had it made. I mean, for the video, the Cranberries wanted to convey both an abstract message as well as something very concrete. And the result would be a mixture of symbolic imagery and actual footage from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Concerning the latter, Dolores had first planned to find television clips of Belfast to use in the video, but director Samuel Behr, he actually insisted that he go to Belfast and shoot his own footage. And what he came back with was some incredibly thought-provoking material. The shots contain a mixture of armed British soldiers on patrol, there's bystanders, and local kids at play, including some who were jumping between buildings. Everything you see in the video is what people normally did day to day up there. Nothing was staged. I actually thought the director was very brave, said O'Riordan. When he got back, there was a lot of adrenaline pumping through him. He was telling me how tense it was and how he was just blown away by the whole thing. Not to be outdone, the symbolic portion of the video was just as striking. To create the finished product, Behr intercut his footage with images of a gold-painted O'Riordan performing the song in front of a cross. Surrounding her were several silver-painted children looking on. The idea was that the cross would be a symbol for suffering and pain and death. And Dolores, covered in gold, was to evoke beauty and grace, according to the director. She was meant to stand in stark contrast to the bitter violence and sorrow that the song itself portrayed. She wanted to send the message that as painful as this world is, there's still real beauty in the world if we open our eyes to see it. And it is worth fighting for, not with tanks, not with bombs, not with guns, but with kindness and compassion. Zombie actually wasn't released as a single in the US. It was a tactic that record labels used at that time, to sell more albums. But that tactic also made Zombie ineligible for the Billboard Hot 100 chart, so it never charted there. Even so, it was still insanely popular on both sides of the Atlantic. I'd say it would have been a top 10 hit pretty easily. It was one of the most played alternative songs from that era. Zombie did, however, go to number 32 on the US mainstream rock chart. It went to number 18 on the mainstream top 40, and it went to number 1 on the alternative airplay chart. But that last one, really no surprise. Internationally, Zombie broke the top 10 everywhere except for Canada, where it reached number 19, and the UK, where it went to number 14. But check this out. Around the rest of the world, it absolutely dominated. It went to number 6 in Peru, number 5 in New Zealand, went to number 3 on the Cranberries' home turf of Ireland. It reached number 2 in Austria, El Salvador, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland. And it took the top spot in Australia, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Iceland, and Zimbabwe. I think that classifies as a worldwide phenomenon, if I say so myself. Since then, Zombie has been featured in several films and TV shows. There was The Office in 2007.
In your head, zombie.
The Next Steps in 2015. You're the Worst in 2017. Pitch Perfect 3 in 2017.
Are we mistaken?
Superstore, Dairy Girls, This Way Up, Cruel Summer, and Army of the Dead just recently.
But we are not yet in sight of the end.
Zombie has also been covered by 80 AM featuring Amy in 1995, Bad Wolves in 2018. Ghostly Kisses in 2018, Miley Cyrus in 2020. Chainsmokers, Faith No More, Shakira, and David Guetta.
My hand is getting sore from hitting this net.
It's also likely that Zombie played a role in bringing about the historic IRA ceasefire on August 34th, 1994. Even though this actually occurred just a few weeks before Zombie was released as a single, the Cranberries had already played this song in concert for over a year to great acclaim. Dating back to as early as April 1993, the month after the Warrington bombings, there were at least 20 performances of Zombie on record before the ceasefire was finalized, including one giant performance at Woodstock 94. Actually, during that performance, in the middle of the song, O'Riordan spoke over the instrumentation saying, "This song is our cry against man's inhumanity to man, man's inhumanity to child, and war, and babies dying in Belfast and Bosnia and Rwanda."
Man's inhumanity to man, and man's inhumanity to child, and war.
Cranberries were actively using Zombie as a means of fighting against the horrors of war. And among other places, they had their eyes fixed on their homeland.
And babies dying, and Belfast, and Bosnia, and Rwanda.
A few years later, in 1998, another critical step towards peace in the Northern Ireland conflict came when political players John Hume and David Trimble jointly won the Nobel Peace Prize. The official reasoning being for their efforts to find a peaceful solution to the conflict in Northern Ireland. And can you guess which band played the award ceremony?
Every day, in every possible way.
You got it. The Cranberries. Sadly, it's now been more than 4 years since we lost Dolores O'Riordan. She was truly one of the great ones. One of the most powerful and unique voices of her generation. January 15, 2018, O'Riordan was tragically found unresponsive in her hotel room. Cause of death was ruled as accidental drowning in a bath following sedation by alcohol intoxication. Dolores was only 46. Her music lives on. She wrote quite a few songs that will not only stand the test of time, but will continue to inspire other artists to take on the injustice and turmoil of their times. Thank you, Dolores. Humanity indeed. Leave us a comment about the Cranberries and their abrasive protest rocker Zombie. What do you remember about this song? Let us know in the comments. Let us know what you feel about O'Riordan and the Cranberries. I just loved her voice. She was an amazing artist. If you like this video, we invite you to subscribe so you never miss out. We'd love to have you as part of our communities, all about keeping the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.